Welcome to an interesting case study of rejecting the red pill and taking the blue pill. But it turns out it's a lot easier to do if you never actually took the red pill to begin with. To explain what I mean, let's look at our favorite left-wing commentator on his journey being consumed by the right-wing rabbit hole only to reject it. Also, I have a small update. The dog is keeping well. She looks ridiculous, but it is what is. Please don't smash bottles on footpaths, and guys, do the thing the algorithm likes, please. Now let's get into the video.
When I was a young gangster, a YG, I was a little bruh, right? A little bruh. I'm about 13 years old, and we're invited into school. It was mandatory, we weren't invited. And we had to do a speech. So, you know, my mate goes up and he does the history of Chelsea Football Club. A girl goes up and she does about horse riding. I go up with my little thumb drive, plug it in, 9/11. So I basically proceed to radicalize a classroom of young impressionable 13-year-olds as to why the American government did 9/11.
Now you have to admit, that's kinda based. Everyone watching the video, I'm sure you've had your reservations about Jimmy, and I certainly do, considering I've made a couple of critiques on his takes already. But you hear this, and I think we all collectively nod in some sort of mutual respect here.
When I was young, I was just a sort of contrarian hipster. I'm not like a communist, but I'm definitely not a capitalist, and I'm definitely left-wing, and I definitely voted to remain in the EU referendum.
Okay, so we fast forward all the way up to 2016, and he's still very politically illiterate. Which isn't really a critique in any particular sense, because many of us were in that space at some point or another. But to me, 2016 was a very catalytic time with Brexit, Trump, the rise of the alt-right discourse. So if you were in any way involved or lurking, you know, now's the time to pick a side.
So time goes by, I grow up, and I remember I had a few jobs working like fucking Sainsbury's or B&Q, and that was further fueling my sort of anti-capitalist feelings. But I remember I got one job and I met this geezer, and he was a proper right-winger.
A proper right-winger, he says. Now before we carry on, what comes into mind when you hear someone who, with no disrespect to Jimmy here, when a normie says, this guy over there, he's a proper right-winger? It's usually going to be of one or two things that are mutually exclusive to one another. On one hand, you have the super libertarian, I love free market, socialism, always bad, pull up your bootstraps, we're always individuals. And on the other hand, you have the ultra-nationalists who are centered around identity, a collective identity based on race, history, culture, tradition, lineage. This is incompatible with the super libertarian free market type. So which one is Jimmy referring to?
It's like a right winger in the flesh. I'd never seen one before. I was like, what the fuck? And then there's this. Capitalism good? Welfare state bad? NHS bad? But you see, although I deeply disagreed with all of his views at the beginning, you gotta remember 13-year-old contrarian Jimmy. He's still in there somewhere. And what he's hearing is contrarian views, you say. Anti-establishment, non-mainstream. Little old hipster Jimmy lapped up this sort of right-wing rhetoric because I realized it was different to everyone else, and that would make me interesting if I believed all these things, right?
So Jimmy went through the, right-wing pipeline, similar to how I did back in the day. From being a bit of a contrarian to then watching the Ben Shapiro type slam dunk social justice warriors. But this is all through the lens of economic individualism as the main vector to its foundation. And it's very convincing at the time because all the socialist rhetoric was wrapped within this woke and social justice framing, which made many people like me just completely reject it. And so what's the alternative for people who are politically ignorant at the time? Well, for people like me and Jimmy, it was listening to Ben Shapiro.
Now I'm at the doors of the alt-right pipeline, right? I pick up my hat with the light, turn the torch on, grab my pickaxe, and I head in. And the first stop is Jordan Peterson.
And then if I'd said to you, please, I'd rather go by she, how would you respond to that on a personal level? How would you...
The way I have responded to that, because I've had a number of conversations with transgendered individuals, is that I use whatever pronoun seems to go along with the persona that they're projecting publicly.
How can I describe the fact that someone who was once a woman, and really still is, had her breasts cut off because she, he, they, their, them had fallen prey to a viciously harmful fad?
So bear in mind, I didn't go to university. I went and just tried to make little businesses. I did a parkour brand, I ran a vegan food store, I did lots of little things. And very importantly, I was not academic. Jordan Peterson, to young Jimmy, sounded like how I imagine smart people sound.
This is a fairly good point Jimmy's making here, and I like how he showed a before and after of Jordan Peterson when he's, before and after he joined the Daily Wire. If you want to know more about the rise and fall of Jordan Peterson, check out this video here. And here, Jimmy starting all these little gay businesses instead of actually going to university. You have to give him a lot of respect for that, because I, unfortunately, went to university and I wasted all my time. So Jimmy's in the right here.
He would use big words, he would do this with his hand, he would think and contemplate. Like, he was the sort of caricature of a smart person. And it was very interesting because all of his views tended to be quite contrarian to sort of mainstream views. And he would, again, like my friend, he would talk about the benefits of capitalism. He would talk about natural hierarchies and that it wasn't capitalism's fault for hierarchies, but hierarchies are natural. And so it's very interesting because if you think about what Jordan Peterson is and what he thinks and his words now, back in 2016, it was very different.
I mean, who else felt the same way here? It sounds like Jimmy and I had a very similar path, but how have we managed to diverge so much at this point?
I'm not proud of this, but I'm just being an honest person. I'm trying to explain where I was at, how I got to where I was, and how I am where I am now. And so I come across Tommy Robinson in this period of time where he goes to jail for, as he's presenting it to the audience online, trying to report on Muslim grooming gangs.
Tommy Robinson, again, we have reviewed Tommy Robinson in some detail. I mean, in short, this video, if you want more detail, it was a good effort of him helping to work to expose the grooming gangs initially. However, he is no other way to explain it. He's a fraudster, he's a liar, he's a huge grifter, and essentially he's an asset for a foreign government to subvert the British people. Now, I'm not sure if Jimmy's going to be able to recognise here that, he shouldn't put Tommy on the pedestal that he is a pillar of what it means to be right-wing in the UK.
To like a rally, like a free speech rally when Tommy Robinson's about to go to jail, and I come across Nico, and I see Nico, and I've seen him online, and I saw how he was trying to present everyone that went to a Tommy Robinson rally as a racist. And I knew from my perspective and knowing who I was, I knew I wasn't a racist. And so I go up to Nico and I tell the people around him that he's trolling you and he's trying to like make you look stupid online. And then Nico does misrepresent me in the video, and he says that I went up to the police and told them to get rid of Nico.
The police then came over and surprise, he started crying to them as well.
When in reality, I was actually saying to the police that Nico has his free speech. Because, I'm fucking obsessed with free speech in this period of time. I don't know why. I think it's the single most important thing on earth.
I mean, free speech, but is it? I mean, let's just skip ahead here, where we get... I think we're going to get a little bit nuanced here.
Now, from, the view I have now, I understand there are sort of two types of racism. There's like overt racism, which is like, I fucking hate migrants when you send them back, they're the worst. And then you have this kind of more like subconscious racism, or like in effect racism. And what I mean by that is like, I knew I wasn't racist because I grew up very multiculturally and I liked people of different races. I had lots of friendships with them and I got along with them very well. So I never in my heart felt anything bad towards people of different races.
Alright, we can skim over this. We need to pinpoint how Jimmy views these two different types of racism. Notice how he presents the sort of grug style of racism, not as I don't like the person because of the colour of their skin or because they are a specific race, but simply we don't like migrants because we need to send them back. Hey listen, if the Overton window is shifted to that being the overt racism, then that is what it is. Well, but what about the intellectual so-called racists like Douglas Murray, a gay or Jordan Peterson, a drug.
These grifters know they can't just say that, I don't know, black people are inferior genetically, although some of them have started doing that again. They've found sneakier ways of wrapping it, often by hiding behind culture.
This is just flat out wrong. I don't think he's being disingenuous with his illustration here. But the fact is, people like Farage and Tommy Robinson, they genuinely believe the whole false paradigm that it has nothing to do with race and it's all culture. And this premise, this idea, is completely wrong.
These pundits will lie and say stuff like 84% of grooming gangs are Asian Pakistani, which has been endlessly disproven. It is white people who make up the majority of grooming gangs.
Right, this is not today's topic, but it's funny how he's participated in a Tommy Robinson rally, a man who initially was an important voice at the time in exposing the grooming gangs and things like that. But Jimmy didn't really seem to listen to any of the actual context of what Tommy had to say. He's now taking the side that Tommy is bad, therefore I must reject everything he's ever said, and now I believe the complete opposite. I mean, this guy seems to be so easily persuaded to one, extreme to the next.
But all this misinformation can lead you to believe that their culture is inferior to ours, and therefore we can't mix. And with the Tommy Robinson thing, it's kind of the same when it comes to Islam, right? You didn't hate people for being having brown skin. You were simply critiquing their ideology, their beliefs.
You wouldn't do that with
Sir William
Would you
Gladstone
do that with
said
the
that.
Bible? Show some respect.
Show some respect.
Show some respect.
Have you read this
for
book?
people?
Have you read this
There
book?
are over
There's
a billion
There are
people.
100
So, I'm listening to the greatest hits, right? I'm listening to Ben Shapiro debate some 12-year-old feminist. I'm listening to Jordan Peterson, Matt Walsh, I'm Joe Rogan till I fucking die. And I find myself accepting that I must be right-wing now. And, little hipster Jimmy, that's cool because now I'm different to everyone. I'm the contrarian, right?
Now again, is it me or is he just so easily persuaded to believe in something? Not because it's true, but because it's cool, because it's popular, just because it's contrarian. When I went down the rabbit hole of race and certain historical events, I went into them with and this is true, I went into them back when I was more politically, oblivious, we'll say. I went into looking into these things the same mindset as looking at flat earth. I wanted to be entertained by silly, fake pseudoscience and to understand these more extreme views, to allow me to at least understand what the other side says. So if necessary, it's not as if it's going to be, I'm not going to do battle, but in order to confront these ideas, I need to know where they're coming from. So I actually ended up becoming more red-pilled, not by Ben Shapiro or Steven Crowder. It was through listening to people who I did disagree with at the time, or I was told I should disagree with, people like Jared Taylor, Robert Seffer, Murdoch clips, all that good stuff. I wasn't going into this wanting to believe the things I was hearing, but when you're listening to certain ideas and you're left with no other choice to accept the reality in front of you, then the truth just becomes a bit clearer, regardless of how politically incorrect or correct it is. And this shaped me. But I think Jimmy, he just seems to hop from one trend or cultural zeitgeist to the next, not because of any real pursuit of truth. He just does it because it's popular. He seems to have no real intention of actually looking beneath the surface of anything beyond economic systems.
When you're listening to all this stuff, you get this sort of impression of the left, like what you're perceiving the left to be like, basically the worst of the left.
You know you're a millennial when you question whether or not it's ethical to bring children into this world. Because of climate change, we don't really know whether or not the world's going to be habitable in 30 years.
And so you just get pushed further and further right from more of a reactionary position rather than some actual ideological and maybe academic understanding of economies and politics. It just sort of is a feeling. And it's so funny, like when Ben Shapiro and these sort of people get famous off of facts don't care about your feelings. But to be honest, conservatives these days, it just seems to be mainly emotion.
Now this is where things get a bit murky. This is why debating people with facts, it's not going to convince anybody of anything. And to inspire your own side, emotion, regardless of what side you're on, emotion will always trump facts. And emotion does not mean irrational. The right wing, let's just use that general term here, does critique the irrationality and instability, emotional instability of left-wing activists and politics, because they don't really seem to focus on the reality of things, on any facts, and they disregard how the world really works. And so in the most general and broad stroke term I'm going to try and break down here without going way off topic, this is just a divide, the left and right, between of femininity being the driving force of the left and masculinity being the driving force of the right. And so when it comes to emotions of the right, what are we actually talking about? Well, is it tolerance, empathy, agreeableness? No, that's emblematic of the left, and that's a feminine trait. For the right, it's strength, it's honour, it's courage. These are the respective emotional frameworks of each side, and tapping into them doesn't make your position any stronger or weaker. It just sets the framing, and if you disagree with the actual framing, then you disagree with the other side almost entirely.
It's how they feel about topics. They hate when you bring up academic papers and actual facts, and they don't trust any of that.
In Springfield, they're eating the dogs, the people that came in, they're eating the cats, they're eating the pets of the people that live there.
And ABC News did reach out to the city manager there. He told us there had been no credible reports of specific claims of pets being harmed, injured, or abused by individuals within the immigrant community.
Well, I've seen people on television.
Let me just...
Another quick point here, and I see this across all social media, instances of crimes being committed by the usual suspects. These barbaric crimes are being inflicted upon the native people, and towns and cities are being demographically changed in less than a generation. And someone like Jimmy comes along and says, well, actually, these studies that have been funded by these and produced by, left-wing think tanks, they actually prove that what you see with your own eyes are lying to you. Multiculturalism is actually making things better. And once again, it's the fault of the people who complain about it. Without these dumb gammons, then our utopia could actually come into fruition.
And either way, I find myself as a right-winger. I have not descended into overtly racist beliefs or overtly transphobic beliefs, misogynistic beliefs. I haven't gone that far, but I probably do house some sort of unconscious discriminatory beliefs in maybe trans people, perhaps even women to a degree. Again, often wrapping their push for equality and better rights as some kind of Marxist revolution.
And here we really get into it. And again, am I being too kind? I'm kind of leaning towards he just doesn't seem to get it instead of being disingenuous. Jimmy's framing the push for equal rights, equality, and equity in the modern era as scaremongering from the right, as this leads to, in his own words, Marx's revolution. To me, this shows that Jimmy, while he says he was listening to people like Jordan Peterson, I think this exposes him that he was never actually paying any attention to what he was saying. And again, I've critiqued Jordan Peterson in the past, but his unraveling of Marxism is compelling, and it's easy to understand if you listen to any of his lectures, speeches, or interviews he's in. He makes it very clear how certain ideas lead to rather extreme circumstances where on the surface they may not seem connected, but they are. And then Jim at the end here says, listening to these, right-wing voices made him discriminatory towards trans people and women. I mean, I don't think so. No, you've just learned there's biological reality, and now you've internalized this as some sort of right-wing subversive hate tactic. This is a fundamental issue with characterizing things as left or right. Because Jimmy and I probably agree quite a lot on economics, which goes to show I probably don't know enough about economics, as Jimmy is proving himself every time we cover him that he doesn't really seem to know anything about anything. But my point is this: consider environmentalism as a political issue. Now, this has been somewhat hijacked by radical progressive elements, which were now, they propose these carbon taxes and destroying our energy sector to replace with unreliable renewable energy. This has made it hard for a lot of people on the right to get behind any mainstream environmentalist movement. Because I'm sure if you're watching this and you are, you're right wing, you do want to see less pollution, less single-use plastics, our forests and streets free from litter, and to be able to be self-sufficient in energy production. But because we can't get behind these green policies, which is essentially a soft form of communism, we are perceived from the right to actually not care about the environment, that we actually love destroying the planet because it's our playground to exploit in everywhere we go. And this again, it highlights the clear distinction and failure to recognize the very obvious difference between what it means to be right-wing and what it means to be libertarian.
I'm deep in the pipeline, right? I'm deep. I mean, COVID happens. Obviously, I don't get vaxxed. I don't wear the mask.
Based Jimmy strikes again. Again, we're on this roller coaster of earning and losing our respect with almost every single thing he says.
And, again, I regret that position now. I literally didn't want to get vaxxed, not because I thought it had 5G in it or something, but just because I was so sort of libertarian right wing that I didn't like the fact the government were telling me to do it. And I don't know, I'm here today, I'm vaccinated, and the woke police haven't come to my door yet, so probably I was overreacting.
And the respect is gone just like that. I mean, he's just outed himself for what I said earlier, that he doesn't actually know, in this case for COVID, he doesn't actually know why he shouldn't get the you-know-what in your arm. He did it because he thought it made him cool.
But originally, I was a parkour YouTuber, and then I become like an extreme sports YouTuber. And when I got to the end of this period in 2022, I wanted to diversify my content, right? And I remember genuinely, I thought I was probably even going to make like those sort of right-wing documentary series, like things like Jen or like some of Moon's stuff, you know, that kind of thing. I thought I'd end up in that ilk.
Yeah, and trying to find a new grift, and he's done it. Being able to change your content to stay relevant, that is impressive. I mean, I started to experiment with some gaming things and culture things, but deep down my inner chud just had to come out. There was no other way if I wanted to make the channel, you know, for me, in a sense. Maybe, I mean, for me, maybe once this grift runs its course, I need to come up with something else. Maybe I could travel third world countries and test all the street food on a scale of how much I get food poisoned. That would actually be really good content. That's a sort of like YouTube slop I like to watch. Kind of reminds me of that guy who's probably made millions of a channel where he stings himself with all these insects that he finds. That guy is a true genius.
But you see, because I was a smart bruh, and I could read the room, I knew that I couldn't make a video, why Jordan Peterson's the best man alive. I knew I had to take my time to kind of meander. So I made a video on a very specific topic about chavs.
Let's just skim over this for the sake of time. Chavs, or in Scotland what we call them NEDs, non-educated delinquents. Let's just hit the generic bullet points of what he's referring to. So these people, they are essentially the UK underclass. They're not just unemployed, they're generally unemployable. Raised in council estates, they're born into poverty from their parents who've made poor life choices, like drugs and alcohol. They then breed, and since they're raised in this, you know, shithole environment, they're essentially one tier above.
Bleep that out, please. I said people.
You know, the cycle repeats forever. Now, with that out of the way, let's get back to it.
But you see it in the video. I'm like, look, guys, I'm about to quote Owen Jones. I don't agree with him, but what he says about chavs is really interesting. You should probably listen to it.
Truly a war in the public sphere. The author and journalist Owen Jones, who I have to admit I don't really agree with him on a lot, he wrote an entire book called Chavs.
So I read it and I'm like, fuck, maybe chavs were like a product of their environment and their economic status. Bear in mind, this is the opposite. This is the antithesis of my view, is that I would have believed as a right-winger that cultures are just like people who make decisions to behave in the way they want to. So these are bad people who are choosing to be bad.
Having such a surface level and quite frankly wrong perception of what culture is and how it works, to me it goes to show how easily Jimmy is swayed from the right wing, because he never understood it to begin with.
The more I research into Thatcher and see how she completely flipped this country on its head, she completely radicalized Britain into being extreme neoliberal capitalists. And it's kind of become just assumed that that's how the world has always worked, that's how we are. But then I discovered that at some point in society, we weren't fucking insane capitalists that we are right now. I've discovered this because there was a period of time called the post-war consensus, which I talk about fucking endlessly on this channel. But in that period of time, we followed a style of economics that was called Keynesianism, which meant that the government's job was to make sure everyone was employed and to tax the wealthy at higher rates, use that money to build infrastructure that benefited the people. And then bear in mind, you know, I'm listening to Donald Trump saying, make America great again, and everyone's harping on about how the world was better back in like the 60s and 50s. And then I find out the reason why it was better was because we had mass public investment. This investment led to the greatest economic boom in history, raised many of the working class into the middle class, which created a whole host of new industries, new products, basically, it was good shit. What we did then was good.
This is all true, more or less. But in the real world, you can either have a welfare state or mass immigration. You can't have both. And that's a very simplistic way of breaking down our current state of affairs. But I digress. His critique of Margaret Thatcher radically shifting the economy into a neoliberal hellscape that we have now, this is not a position that right-wing people, real right-wing people, nationalists actually, they don't regard this as an actual positive change. This, again, is just libertarian witchcraft.
And you know, you've got to bear in mind that I am being told the only answer to life's problems is dog eat dog, free market capitalism. Get the government out of everything. The government can do nothing right. Only the geniuses of commerce can do anything, like our water supply that has no piss and poo in it, or like our really quick and definitely on time and affordable train system, or like our really affordable housing that people definitely aren't speculating on and shrinking the middle class.
It's funny how Jimmy and I can agree on everything, or more or less everything he said just there, yet we're so polar opposite in many other ways.
Time's going past, man, and I'm learning this shit, and I'm like, fuck, and I'm starting to realise, like, I don't know if I believe all the things that I believe about right-wing politics, but I hadn't accepted it, right? I was becoming more and more distrustful.
I'm sure during our libertarian phases, which I'm sure we've all gone through to some extent, we all saw the flaws that Jimmy highlights here. So what did we all do? Well, we went to the next level. We went deeper, because truth is buried under all the mirages and the talking heads. And we did so because truth is above ourselves. Jimmy, on the other hand, well, he's now a Green Party activist. He's just done a 180 and took his ball and went home.
I look on my phone at all the right-wingers talking about Ukraine, and they believe that Zelensky is like, I don't know, a blue-haired feminist or something.
I will stress this again. One of the greatest enemies of our nation right now is Ukraine.
And they're trying to say that it's actually NATO, and NATO are the bad guys, and America's bad, even though we're pro-America. America is... And, you know, I'm learning more about the Ukrainian conflict and all the history of how it came to be and why we defend them and why we can't allow Russia to just go and take over sovereign nations.
Yeah, let's just skip over this. The Russia-Ukraine conflict is not really a left or right issue as I see it. And he's like bought into this kind of like Reddit tier dialogue, quoting Tim Pool as right wing. Only kind of reinforces this. So let's just move to the next point.
Right now we're deep in the sort of Andrew Tate era. Andrew Tate has blown up. And at first it was kind of, you know, it was kind of fun. It was like, especially if you're sort of a young right-wing libertarian type, you need to get strong to look after yourself, look after women, looking after the people you love. Like that sort of stuff was kind of nice. I started going to the gym, I started doing all that stuff. I was always sort of into the self-help stuff, so all that shit sounded good. And then he started to talk about women.
To some degree, as a man, you have to instill drama in the relationship, because if you don't, she's going to get bored.
No, that's very true, man.
And she's either going to leave or she will instill the drama, which gives her control.
Then you're seeing all these Fresh and Fit podcasts and Sneeko and all this crazy shit. And you're seeing like people making their entire livings complaining about women.
I partially agree. I mean, Tate was, in my mind, the next kind of logical step for young guys to latch onto after the teachings of Jordan Peterson. They're really incomplete, which is why people moved on from that. And Tate does talk, you know, favourably of several right-wing issues, and he's funny. You can't deny that. But he's a mixed race Muslim pimp. I mean, don't need to say any more. And I'm sure Jimmy here, like his take on Tommy, he will project that everything these guys stand for is now emblematic of the right wing. And just because I don't like something that he says, the right wing must be bad. It sounds like I'm really kind of oversimplifying Jimmy's train of thought, but that's literally it.
There was one bruh who would go on these shows, and his name was Destiny.
Women fare a lot better post-divorce than men do, bro. And the reason why is because they get the resource, they get the money, they get the children, they get put in a better situation financially.
No, they don't.
Yeah, dude, they get the house.
Moms don't live good on child support. That's not true.
What?
Have you ever seen a bitch on child support? She's not living the greatest fucking life.
Women fare worse than men in almost every degree after divorces. So the idea of pretending...
What are you talking about?
They make more money, they have better dating strategies afterwards. Men just do better than women in almost every single metric post-divorce.
What? Bro?
Destiny was really interesting because he was a lefty, and he was proud to be a lefty. He didn't try and hide. He didn't say he was like a centrist. He was like, no, I'm on the left. But he didn't play into like the left-wing woke crazy stereotype. He was just a normal dude.
A normal guy. Have you listened to Destiny? Are we going to kind of wrap this video up because I escaped the alt-right pipeline because Destiny is good at debates? Debating libertarians. I mean, how does Destiny fare when he was debating, you know, Mark Collette or Nick Fuentes? Destiny is just insufferable. I feel silly earlier for trying to frame Jimmy in a more positive light.
Final nail in the coffin for me, at the point where I realised I was no longer right-wing, was when I came across Gary's Economics.
You need to have structures in place in your economy that prevent the rich from taking all of the wealth.
And here we go, my energy levels are, it's quite a long video. My energy levels are depleting here, so let's summon what we can here. Let's go into the economic angle. Let's just listen for a bit.
The right wing really love to argue about culture. They always say that, like, it's people's, the problems in society comes from people's ideas and beliefs and their values, which is super convenient, right? Because when anything goes bad, you can just say that, oh, well, it's because people are lazy or they're radical Marxist or this. All the while, there's no solution to that, right? What can you do? You can't change people's minds. So it's just like, oh, well, I guess we just have to accept the status quo. But when you fundamentally challenge that view, the sort of outcomes come from culture and people's individual decisions, and you start to realize that outcomes, you know, like negative outcomes, crime, poverty, people having less families, having less kids, that maybe doesn't come from culture. Maybe the reason that men and women aren't having kids and getting married isn't because they're no longer Christian and they don't believe in families and the nuclear family. Maybe it's because no one can fucking afford to have families. Maybe it's because most people in their 20s still haven't moved out of their parents' house. Maybe it's because they don't make enough money between two people to afford to have a child.
I mean, this sounds okay to me. Am I being retarded? I mean, none of this seems to be incompatible with the right-wing nationalist worldview.
And so I realised that I actually don't think everything is culture, and I think mainly things come from economics. I think most culture comes from economics.
Culture comes from economics. Is this true? Most people lived very simple lives before the Industrial Revolution. By our standards, they were in poverty. Was there mass carriage stabbings? Were children not safe to walk the streets? I don't think so. Culture, in my view, is downstream from race. I believe that culture is, imagine an artist painting a picture. The picture is a reflection of the artist. But let's take St. Paul's Cathedral. This is an expression of a people as a whole through architecture and spirituality. That is a cultural expression which is from a racial foundation, and that expresses itself into all facets of life, of what we see and how we interact with one another. But at the end of the day, Jimmy doesn't really seem to understand the right wing through this lens because he can't see beyond libertarianism. It's as simple as that. And I probably should have ended the video sooner because we keep coming back round to that point. But let's just see how Jimmy's video ends. Right, never mind, it was just more of the same. But wasn't this quite an interesting overview? Jimmy is probably like a lot of people who they hate the right wing because it's conflated with neoliberalism and libertarianism, which if you speak to anyone who's actually right wing, they probably have a more scathing critique of this system than the left. Who was it in the 1950s protesting the selling off our industries to China and other third world countries, our manufacturing industry? Who was saying this would be a bad thing in the long run? Well, it was none other than a real fascist, a true patriot, Oswald Mosley. Now guys, hope you enjoyed this video. Do the thing that algorithm likes. Until next time.